Good morning, everyone. So nice to have you here, bright and early on a lovely Guadalupe morning. Who would have thought we'd have such good weather? And such a great group of friendly people, friendly friends. I'm Virginia Souza. I'm the president of the Santa Maria Valley, the League of Women Voters, Santa Maria Valley. And on behalf of our board members, I'd like to welcome you all. And right off the bat, I think our keynote speaker has arrived just right on the dot, and he's ready to tell us the topic we've been waiting to hear about, and that is affordable housing. And based on his biography, which I have here, he's an excellent one to inform us because he has such deep roots in our area. And you know that our motto is vote local. Your vote counts more. So he's got the deep roots, been a student in our public school system, and come all the way through his elected offices. He started working in politics, going door to door for Jack O'Connell. Some of you may remember Jack O'Connell. And it's just so serendipitous that we would have this meeting today with our first hosting of 37th District Assemblyperson Gregg Hart right next to Jack O'Connell Park. And his topic is housing, and we happen to be having this meeting in one of the most impressive models for affordable housing, and it's been going on in the Tri-Counties for, I'd say, over 20 years. It's People's Self-Help Housing, a wonderful model of corporate and private partnerships to develop housing that elevates the residents. So let's see, what else can I tell you about? He's been, I wanted to tell you his expertise. He's been the original manager of the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, SBCAG, Traffic Solutions Program, where he promoted local green and sustainable transportation options. And later he served as Deputy Executive Director for SBCAG. He's been our county supervisor, and now he was a city council person. He was on the Planning Commission, California Coastal Commissioner. So what more expertise could we have at our fingertips and our new representatives? So without further ado, I'd like to present 37th District Assemblyperson Gregg Hart.
Well, it is really a pleasure and an honor to be with you here this morning, and what a kind introduction. Thank you, Virginia. That's really nice of you. I am so tempted to do this before we start. I couldn't pass that up. Well, I'm always overjoyed with the opportunity to join these spectacular folks from the League of Women Voters, because you know these issues as well as anybody in the county, and you're constantly educating your members and working hard to explain complicated, dense public policy issues to the voters so that we can have an informed electorate, that they can do their job of electing folks, to do the jobs that I am responsible for, to represent you in Sacramento and try and solve really difficult problems. There are no easy solutions yet left. The things that were simple were done a long time ago. Now we are dealing with very complex issues, and it takes everybody working together. There is no way to solve these things without collaborating and thinking hard together, trying new solutions, and being persistent. Because these problems, frankly, if you were to read a Santa Maria Times or a Santa Barbara News Press article from 100 years ago and think, what are the issues that folks were struggling with back, in the 1920s? Honestly, you would see water, transportation, and housing as big ticket issues. The issues were different, They were smaller in scale, but they were the same things. We're never going to solve these problems. Our job is to manage them in the moment and do the best we can and to try and make things better, because we live in an incredibly attractive place in the planet. Folks from all over the world know what a Mediterranean climate is and a coastline is, and it is very attractive to people wherever they live. And so we're constantly going to have a challenge with being able to provide enough housing for folks who need to be here, let alone all the folks that want to be here. And to put a little precise, well, let me start off just telling a little bit about myself too. Virginia did a great job, and I probably don't need to add much to that. But it is serendipitous and amazing that my mentor, Jack O'Connell's Park is named after him, and I began working for him literally 40 years ago. In 1982, I was a UCSB student. I volunteered on his election campaign. He was the guy that the Democratic Party said, "Oh, you run against Brooks Firestone, you 30-year-old high school teacher. You don't really have a chance. We're not going to support you much at all, but somebody has to run and be on the ballot against, what everybody thought was a shoo-in, that Brooks was going to win." And Jack organized a bunch of college students and knocked on doors everywhere, was relentless, never took a day off, never let us take a day off. Well, we literally slept in the campaign headquarters to keep the printers rolling so we keep sending out letters to voters. And on election night, with the help of Cesar Chavez turning out the vote in Oxnard, he won in the most unlikely election victory in the state of California at the time. And started an amazing career, went on to be superintendent of public instruction, was a major force in education reforms, and I just learned everything I know about politics. I learned in the first 5 years of my political career working for Jack. I would walk on one side of the street, he'd walk on the other side of the street. He would remember the houses at the end of the cul-de-sac. He would remember who were living in houses. He was a savant and is still a great guy and a good friend, and I'm indebted to him for him giving me the chance to begin my political career with such a great mentor. And I have a future star on my staff. Ethan Bertrand is my district director. Ethan and I started working together when he was an intern in my Santa Barbara City Council office. He was a critical part of our team at the County Board of Supervisors, and now he runs the county-wide district office here in Santa Barbara County, and is just an incredible, an independently elected school board member in the Goleta School Board District as well, and formerly in Isla Vista elected official. So he is a guy that, first of all, takes care of all the concerns and issues and questions that people might have in the district about what the state can do to help you, but he's an amazing person in his own right as well. So I want to start off by talking about affordable housing by telling you a little story that that occurred to me not that long ago. I was shopping at a grocery store in downtown Santa Barbara, and the person ahead of me was chatting with the checker. And it turns out the checker doesn't live in Santa Barbara County. She lives in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. And she doesn't commute up to the job. They actually had her move to a hotel across the street from the grocery store, and were paying her time and a half to work a shift at the grocery store because they can't get people to fill these jobs here locally. Why can't they? Because people can't afford to live here. So that's how desperate employers are getting. By a lot of estimates, there's about 30% of the workforce is vacant because people can't afford to live here. And that is having a tremendous effect across the board in all sectors of our economy. And if you talk to people in HR departments, in public employers, private employers, I'm sure Chief Cash can talk about that. The folks from the city of Santa Maria, city of Guadalupe, this is a common refrain, and that story I think really illustrates how desperate we are. We cannot continue the way we have been going. We have to do something different. And to kind of put it into perspective too, let's just do some little math. If you think back 30 years ago, what was the average income in the state of California? Anybody have a guess? There's no wrong answer.
$2 an hour.
Well, I can't even do the math now how much per hour. But the average household income in 1990 in the state of California was $60,000 a year. And the average price of a house was $200,000. So if you were going to try to buy a house in 1990, you had made $60,000 a year, you could see, hey, $200,000, this is a little bit, I make almost a third of what I need to buy that house, so, it can work out. So let's fast forward now, 2023. Average income in the state of California is only $80,000 a year. It's gone from $60,000 to $80,000 a year in 30 years. What has the price of housing done in that same time? Can you buy a house for $200,000? Yeah. The average price of a house in the state of California today is $750,000. So if you're making $80,000 and you now have to go to $750,000, that's almost 10 times your income as opposed to 3 times your income. And that's fundamentally the problem. That's why we have a housing crisis. That's why we have a housing affordability crisis, is that those things have gotten out of whack. And why did they get out of whack? Well, economics will tell you supply and demand. If you don't build enough houses, your prices will go up for the houses that you do build. And that's exactly what's happened. We have not kept pace with the growing population in the state of California, in our county, anywhere in the state, with the demand for housing. And we are estimated to be about 2.5 million housing units short in the whole state of California. We need to build those to get things back into some semblance of balance and to correct this horrible problem of housing unaffordability and the impact that that's having on the ability to hire people and keep people in jobs, keep our economy going. We need to build those houses by 2030. Now, we may be getting a little bit of a reprieve because the state's population is declining. Why is the state's population declining? For the first time in history, since the gold rush, for all time, the state of California's population has increased every time they've measured it, until the last, I think, 2 and maybe now 3 years. Why do you think our population is declining? Yes?
Probably because they're moving out of the state because they can't afford to live here.
It's that simple. That's exactly right. So we may not need as many houses down the road as were originally projected because the population is going. But that's kind of, that's not a solution. That's kind of giving up on a really hard problem. So we're going to have to do things differently. And the state, obviously is, state and local governments are in a little bit of tension about this. How are we going to do this together? And historically, land use decisions have been the responsibility of local governments. The state was really more of a funding source, and creating laws that apply to other things. But as this crisis has become more and more endemic and more difficult to solve, the state is beginning to get more involved in local land use issues. And that's created some tension between local governments and the state of California. I have been a local elected official my entire career, so I'm sensitive to that. I would prefer that these decisions be made at the local level. But it isn't as though this problem is broken in isolated pockets and that there are some communities that are stepping up to the problem and other communities that are not. This problem exists at almost every state or every local government in the state of California. There's about 400 incorporated cities, and only a handful of them have met the targets that have been set out for housing production in those communities. So this isn't some isolated thing. This is a systemic problem. It's very, very difficult at the local government level when you try to propose a specific housing development, because neighbors say, I believe in housing, I want to see affordable housing, I understand the problem, but that particular location isn't the right one to do it. And when you do that in this neighborhood, and you do that in that neighborhood, and you do it in every neighborhood in the whole state of California, this is the problem that we have. This is why we have a housing affordability problem. So we have to create some structures that kind of protect against that force this conversation to be more productive and more successful. So the state is incrementally doing that. And the very first thing I think that has had a big impact was on the state regulations that have made it much, much easier to build granny units. That was something that was very controversial at the time. I think everybody kind of freaked out and said, well, what's going to happen? Where are all the cars going to go? How is this going to work? By and large, I think that has been pretty benign. There are places where there are issues, but it has happened in a way that is building units that are much more affordable and much more accessible, and not doing it in a particularly disruptive way. But by itself, that's not going to solve the problem. So in addition to that, there have been other moves, different bills that would expand the ability of developers who are building affordable housing to have expedited review at the local level, to do more dense projects near transit lines, things like that. And I think you're going to see more of that. There was legislation to waive CEQA review of affordable housing that was infill housing in cities. And so bit by bit, I think the legislature is determined to try to clean out some of the things that historically have slowed down housing development. And that's, that's going to be a big change, and we have to be very careful about that. And I think we have to be smart about it. And I'm not sure in the rush to do these things at the legislature, they have been as thoughtful as they really need to be. We need to be thinking about bigger planning issues in addition to just developing units. We have to build smart communities. We have to build livable communities. We have to be thinking about the next 50 to 100 years, because the buildings that are going to be built are going to last that long. And they can't just be shoddy and quick and unthoughtful. The most important thing about civilization and how we live together is building livable places that work for people, that create happy, fulfilled people. And that is a really sophisticated art. There's a lot of literature about that. The Santa Barbara UCSB Library Reads book is called Happy Cities this year. And it talks about how you have to be intentional about building spaces. Building spaces that bring people together, that encourage socialization, that encourage fun. And that's something that hasn't had enough attention in Sacramento, but I'm hoping to add to the conversation. My experience, as Virginia described, as a planning commissioner, as a coastal commissioner, I think can help inform that debate. And I'm going to try to add that to the conversation. Not only do we need to build these units, but we need to build them right. And we need to build them so that they are livable and that they help build community, not just a place to live. So there's a lot of different strategies. Some have been more successful, others have been less successful. One of the best systems for building affordable housing that I've seen was the redevelopment agencies that existed, a few years back, maybe about 10 years ago. The state was allowing local governments to set aside revenue that came from the increased property tax of the central neighborhoods in downtown. So the idea was that you would draw a line around a particular neighborhood in your downtown core, and as property owners invested in those buildings and increased their value, a certain percentage of that income would be captured by local governments to keep that money rather than sending it to the state. And then they would use that money to reinvest in infrastructure to kind of create this virtual circle where better infrastructure investment led to more private sector investment, led to higher property values that spun off more money. And the best part of that was that the state law required 10% of all those dollars to be spent on building affordable housing projects. So there was a reliable, steady, predictable source of funding at the local government level to build affordable housing. And the governments that had redevelopment agencies that did that did a lot of it and were very successful. City of Santa Barbara is a great example of that. The redevelopment agency there, in that 30-year span when redevelopment existed, built 15% of all of the rental stock in the city of Santa Barbara is capital A affordable for 100 years, and the housing authority maintains that. There are tens of thousands of people that wouldn't be able to live in the city of Santa Barbara without the construction of those housing units. And by anybody's measure, if you go to those units and you look at them, they are the best looking apartment buildings in those neighborhoods. There's no compromise. The quality of the materials, the architecture, the way they fit into those neighborhoods, nobody complains about it. They're a plus. The problem is since there were abuses of the redevelopment agency system, some local governments took that money and invested in things that were not, the right thing to do. They built sports stadiums. They tore down small businesses and built car malls and things. And so there was a reason why the state legislature and the governor said we need to reform this redevelopment process. I think that was the right thing to do, but at the same time, they threw out the baby with the bathwater, and we lost this local affordable housing stream at the same time. So that's a big deal, because it's been replaced with grants, and the state is able, with money, kind of one-time basis, to cobble up money and then say to communities, if you commit to putting together a package, we'll review it, we'll consider it, we'll compete, you'll compete against a bunch of other entities around the state, and we'll reward the best ones the money. And what that does is it just makes it disadvantages places like our county, where prices are higher, because if you're going to give out money at the state level and you can build affordable housing in Fresno, you can do 1,000 units. If you take that same amount of money with our expensive land values, you might be able to build 100 units. And so inherently, we lose out in those competitions. And in addition to that, what was really powerful was having regular, reliable, predictable funding from year to year, so that you could go out and you could buy land that you wouldn't be developing for 5 years, and then in the 3-year time frame, you'd be developing the engineering drawings, and you'd be getting everything ready, so you would constantly have projects working their way through the process. You'd have design, you'd have planning, you'd have construction, and then you'd start the cycle and keep it going all the time. Now, with the grant, the inconsistency of the grants, you don't really have the opportunity to land bank. You don't have to have the opportunity to have these projects in the pipeline and have the production that really makes a difference. So we need to find a way to fix that and get back. It's not easy to figure out that funding source. There are a lot of different ideas. Senator Monique Lamone, my colleague in Sacramento, has a really interesting idea. She's got a big bill that's working its way through the legislature that would tax vacation rentals and use that money to provide a local, reliable funding stream. So we'll see how that bill goes. But that's the key to the whole thing, I think, ultimately. We have these mandates that say you have to build a certain number of units, but we don't have a way to make sure those units are affordable and to make sure that they're being built, not just a mandate to build them. So these are daunting challenges. But I just really want to conclude by telling you a couple stories that give me encouragement. I was traveling in Europe a couple years ago, pre-pandemic, and I'm walking around the streets in the major European capitals, and the first thing I'm struck with by the most is I'm not seeing people living on the street begging for money. And any city in the state of California you go to, folks are encampments, they're living under freeways, they're just, I don't know how they're surviving. And it's a tragedy, and it's personally moving, and I know many of you are working really hard as volunteers to help folks who are in need like that. But it was striking to be in a place where that was not the case. And eventually I went up to a police officer in Amsterdam, and I said to him, I live in California, and we have people experiencing homelessness, living on our streets, and I don't see that here. What is going on in Amsterdam is different. And he looked at me with almost a quizzical look on his face and said, well, in our country, we take care of people. Isn't that profound? In our country, we take care of people. Well, I want our country to do that too. I think that's what we all need to do. I think that's what we all want to do. So, with that as our mission statement, we just need to figure out what it is we're going to do. Because what we're doing is not that. We're not taking care of people. And we need to do better. I'm going to end with a story, a little self-deprecating story that tells you a little bit of something about me. So last year, I was campaigning for office, and I'm in Santa Barbara, and I have to get on a plane out of the Santa Barbara airport at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's dark, and I'm late, and I'm rushing. I've got my fancy suit on because I'm going to try and impress people and ask them to vote for me. And I'm rushing across the parking lot, and I decide I got to look at my boarding pass. So I pull up my boarding pass, and I'm intently looking at it. Walking full speed, I walk into the side of a parked truck. And the first thing that happens is my nose hits this truck, and it explodes. There's blood everywhere. And I've got this white shirt on, and a fancy blue suit, and blood is gushing. So I lean forward, and I stagger into the bathroom and try to stop this bleeding. And if you've had a facial injury, it doesn't stop bleeding very quickly. So after about 10 minutes in the bathroom, putting on toilet paper and tissue paper, I realize I'm really going to miss this plane now. I got to go. So I go to the line, I'm holding this thing on, and I gotta go through TSA, and the woman standing next to me kind of looks up at me horrified, but she's kind, and she says, here, take this surgical mask and put it on your face. It'll hold the tissue paper in, your hands will be free, and you can make it through TSA, and it works. It's perfect. So I get to where I'm going about 2 hours later, and I'm at the event where I'm going to get interviewed, and I've still got the surgical mask on with the toilet paper and tissue paper underneath it. And I'm the only person wearing a mask, and I realize this is not a good look. I need to figure something out here. And at that point, I realized this is all congealed now, too. So I can't peel the tissue paper off, or it's going to start bleeding on you. So I realized there's nothing you can do except tell the truth. So I walk to the front of the room, and I tell the story, and I peel off the surgical mask to reveal this clump. And I tell them, I'm the only candidate who walked through a parked truck to be with you today. And they laughed, and they cheered, and they endorsed me. And I think it says something a little bit about, maybe I'm crazy, but determined. And that's the kind of representative I'm going to be for you in Sacramento working on these issues. Thank you. Sure. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Wanda.
Good morning.
Good morning to you too.
Assemblyman Hart. Oh, thank you. So my question is, the bill that passed that was signed by the governor for the vacant state buildings where they can build housing. Do we have any in Santa Barbara County? And how are things going as far as statewide?
That's a great question. I don't personally know about the site inventory. I know that the county has been doing a lot of work, looking very hard at abandoned sites. And there are some great success stories just on the horizon. I hope everybody knows about the Dignity Moves Tiny Cabins project that's going in across from the government center in Guadalupe. That, I'm telling you, is going to be one of the most important projects in our county. We have had a smaller demonstration project down in South Santa Barbara County, right in the shadow of the county courthouse. The most, important architectural neighborhood in downtown Santa Barbara, in the El Pueblo Viejo, and there are these tiny cabins right there next to a very expensive penthouse apartment, or condominium, actually. And the neighbors there were scared to death of this idea. They were opposed. They didn't want it. There were a lot of people who didn't think that was a good idea to put those cabins there. But there are 35 units now. If you drive by it, you can't even see it. There's a stone masonry wall in front that looks just like any other, fancy Santa Barbara stucco thing. And there have been no problems, no issues. Folks are respectful. The Good Samaritan shelter runs the program, and they are the best operator in all of Santa Barbara County. The only thing that is constraining Sylvia's ability to do more is the fact that there's only one person. We have to clone her. I recognize Good Sam Shelter as the California Nonprofit of the Year from our district. Yes. They are going to be the operator of the Guadalupe Center too, which I think is 95, close to 100 units in that site. And then there's a new proposal now for the old juvenile hall facility down in Goleta on Hollister Avenue. And honestly, if you can find any location anywhere, ideally it is a publicly owned facility because it just makes things go faster and the costs are lower. The folks who are running Dignity Moves are determined to use our county as sort of a pilot project and to show what can be done. We have, by the census point in time account, about 2,000 unhoused individuals that we need to get housed. And between the downtown Santa Barbara cabins, the Goleta cabins, and the Santa Maria cabins, we're looking at almost 200 units there, right there, toward that goal of 2,000. And that's only something that's happened within the last year. And Dignity Moves is in a position, they're raising money statewide to try and get more of these cabins to show that in Santa Barbara County, we can address that 2,000 number. And they think if we can do that and we can show that here, they can make a great case to the whole state of California that this is the system and this is the model that can make a change on this subject. And so I'm super excited about it. I'm a huge advocate. I'm talking to everybody, asking them to come down, my colleagues, to come down to Santa Barbara, visit this, see what we're doing. And for the first time, I really feel like we're making some really serious progress on a very tough issue. Thank you for your question.
I'll talk loud. I can talk loud. So I have a couple things that the lead I've spoken with about this past year. So 2 things. I live in Lompoc, and I'll just say LAFCO. And those concerns with housing and the inability to build smart housing is very difficult, and the need because of Vandenberg. And I know you can't really address that, but that issue is out there for the league. But more importantly, we've spoken this past year about senior housing and the cost. I know I went to, just by happenstance for another issue, went to the Santa Maria Council meeting, and they spoke about the senior housing, of how every time someone moves or dies in some of our wonderful situations around here, it goes up 10%. And it just keeps going up. And I know, like, Even Solving has a beautiful, residence out there. So that is a concern I know for the league that we've spoken about. And again, I'm not sure there's much we can say about that, but it is a huge concern as far as housing security.
A couple things come to mind, Allison. Thank you for that great question. The state, and particularly with the impetus of the Governor Newsom during the pandemic, really tried to do new things to address the urgent shelter and housing, homeless housing problem, because the encampments obviously were exploding out of control. And the conversion of hotels to shelters during the pandemic was also very, very powerful and very successful. It got folks indoors for the first time. And I think what we learned from that process is that our previous system was based on shelters. We had congregate care facilities where we asked people to come together, and it seemed like it was economical. It cost less per person to bring everybody into one big space, and then you could provide meals and have showers and things like that. But there was a point where folks weren't coming into those facilities. It didn't match what they were looking for, and those spaces were underutilized. And then during COVID, what was particularly tough is the social distancing requirements kind of depopulated those facilities and made them less efficient because you could only have so many people indoors. So the experimentation with using hotels, the hotels were empty because folks weren't traveling and they needed an income stream. The state had funds and they wanted to use that. So we converted some of the hotels to temporary living quarters for folks who were experiencing homelessness. And I went and visited. Ethan was a volunteer at one of those projects. And we went out and visited folks, and I was astonished to see who was living in these hotel rooms. I was imagining it was the folks that I'm seeing in the encampments. Most of the people that were living in those hotel units were seniors. Some of them 80 and 90 years old. They had been living in their cars. One of their spouse had passed during the pandemic, and the other surviving spouse just had no capability with one income to survive in the apartment that they had been living in together. And they found themselves living in a car, and then they found themselves living on the street. And then this amazing opportunity came to come indoors and stay in a hotel room. And they were so grateful, and it was just such a tragedy to hear what had happened previously. But by being indoors, they were able to get them their will and their strength back. And we were able to get them into the pipeline for permanent supportive housing, and then as they moved into those other units, then we were able to get more people in. And so there are so many facets to this challenging problem. The core of it is, if we're not building enough housing units, supply and demand is going to continue to get out of whack. Rents are going to rise, housing prices are going to continue to rise, and we will never get ahead of the curve. So we just have to have more housing units built to begin to really turn this curve around. And at the same time, we have to have these affordable housing strategies. And that's where the tiny cabins come in, because they're much more affordable to build. It's about $50,000 a key for one of these tiny cabins, as compared to building a permanent supportive housing facility like People's Self-Help Housing does a fantastic job. There's a lot of great nonprofit affordable housing developers in Santa Barbara County who are super skilled and experienced, but the land cost here and the construction costs, you're looking at, $600,000 or $700,000 per key for a unit if you have to build it, as a permanent building versus $50,000 for a cabin. And so we can do 10 times the number of cabins as we can permanent supportive housing. We still need to do the permanent supportive housing though, because we need to have people who can transition out of the cabins. But we can get more people indoors. People want to come indoors into these cabins, and that's the first step in the problem, solving the problem.
I'm going to ask that we use.
I'm not one of your constituents. I'm Chris Carson. I'm up from Los Angeles, and I'm the incoming president of the League of Women Voters of California. And I'm not going to talk about housing. I'm here to thank you for your very key votes on the 2 redistricting bills and for your very courageous vote in helping to get ACA4 out of appropriations. That was a tough call, and we really appreciate your support.
That's
Thank
very
you.
kind of you to come all this way to thank me. I thank you for coming all this way. Honestly, those were not tough votes. That's what I got elected to do, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Hello.
Hi, sir.
Good to see you. I'm not only a part of the League, I'm a part of the Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival, and I'm going about a week flying to Washington, D.C. for our Moral Poverty Action Congress. What do people who don't have any income do about housing? How do we help them?
That's a great question. Well, California, is different than a lot of other states. We are the 4th largest economy in the world. That's a big advantage. When you think about that, that's pretty impressive. The economic power and the wealth in our state is greater than just about every other country that you could name. Only the United States as an entity, and Japan and China are ahead of California. So if we were a country, we would be ahead of France, Great Britain, any other country you'd name. So we have resources in our state, and I think the legislature and the government here has been trying, determinedly for a long time to increase the social safety net and to make things, better for people who are struggling at a low income. The flip side of having all that wealth and all that income and all that power is we're an expensive state to live. So it's not like we're making dramatic progress, in reducing poverty and getting folks, on track. In fact, Santa Barbara County is probably a great microcosm of the state of California and the country. We have some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the world. Prince Harry and Meghan live in Montecito behind a big gated house, and Oprah lives down there too. About as expensive a real estate as you could possibly find. And yet we have some of the lowest income communities in the state of California by population and census information. So it's a serious challenge, and there isn't an answer for it other than people working together, all the community organizations that we benefit from, from Good Sam shelters to the hundreds of nonprofits that are working with local governments. And I think our community as a whole, we're going to recognize Police Chief Cash and Mayor Ariston Julian later in the program for their incredible leadership during a really scary, difficult time. But that's what I think our community is about, is people don't hesitate to help each other and to try and figure out practical, real-life solutions to helping their neighbors get by. And that gives me inspiration and hope every day.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and we'll turn it back over to Virginia.
Thank you again for your time. It was really fun today.
I'd like to take just a moment and thank you very much for introducing yourself to us today. A bottle of wine. I know it's not it's from Allen Hancock College. We do a great job here in Santa Maria Valley with our college viticulture. So we don't think this is too exorbitant a gift to be considered a bribe or. I don't think you have to report this one. And we also have we've closely collaborated with the Santa Barbara League of Women Voters, and we're beginning a wonderful collaborative long-term project with them. They have a book club, and next month's book is Happy Cities, the book that you mentioned. And last month's book is about poverty, this is the root of homelessness, really. And so we want to present you with a copy of this, as if you don't have enough to read.
I love reading.
And a copy of the New York Times Magazine on May 28th came out with a fabulous in-depth article about the public housing in Austria. And the last page summarizes the government subsidies in terms of tax credits and tax advantages that can be used to make housing more affordable. So just read the last page, and that's all you need to do. We'll be doing just fine with housing.
My father was the library director for the city and county of Santa Barbara. In fact, that's what brought us to Santa Barbara County. He graduated from library school, and his first job was in Lompoc as the library director. So I moved to Santa Barbara County when I was 2 to live in Lompoc. And as a result of my father having his job, I am a lifelong reader. There's nothing that I don't. I have a massive stack of books on my bed, and this will get to the very top. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. And before we go on to the next part of our program, I was so remiss, as I tend to be, in not introducing the dignitaries and our honored guests in the audience. And first and foremost, I'd like to introduce, as she's had to introduce herself, but Chris Carson, who is our California League of Women Voters president up from Los Angeles. So Chris Carson. I'll save these for you up in front. We have a bouquet for you, Chris. We have the city manager from Guadalupe, Mr. Dodd, with us today. We have 2 city council people. We have Christina Hernandez right here from Guadalupe. And we have Maribel Hernandez from the city of Santa Maria. So, thank you for joining us today. And now, Mireya Pina will help out. And Mireya has planned this wonderful event for us today, and it's been just such a joy to work with Mireya all year long as one of our board members.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and joining us today at this annual meeting. My name is Mireya Pina. I'm a current member of the board of the League of Women Voters serving all of Santa Maria Valley. And I'm here today to present 2 awards to 2 very admirable gentlemen, our very own Guadalupe Mayor Ariston Julian and our Public Safety Director Michael Cash for their innovative leadership and swift action during the January floods. I'll simply start by saying that everyone can lead, but not everyone can lead with courage and compassion, especially when it comes to serving our most vulnerable families in our community of Guadalupe. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how these awards came about. We were meeting with our board and we're talking about all the wonderful work that was done earlier in the year. And we were trying to figure out whether we were going to award this to the city as a whole or to the individuals who play out their roles. So we actually just decided to do them individually because a lot of what we saw was people acting, and it was based on the core values of who they are. So for that reason, we decided to award them individually. And I also had the great honor to work alongside them because along with being a member of the board, I also work for Family Service Agency Little House by the Park here next door. So we were a big part of the crisis response team. So I was able to witness a lot of the wonderful work that was done earlier this year. So I kind of wanted to just take a couple minutes to kind of bring us back to the evening of January 9th. So as we all kind of felt across the Central Coast, there had been a lot of rain during that time, and it really all just kind of happened here in Guadalupe, and we really saw the worst of it on that evening when the water had come in through the back of Pioneer Street, which is a little bit lower. It's a street that's a little bit lower than the other streets, so that area was impacted. And 12 families had been displaced, a total of 47 individuals. This includes kids, adults, seniors. And so I wanted to talk about a little bit of the way that happened, the way the recovery process began. So the fire department got the call, and our public safety director was informed. A call was made to our mayor, and that just kind of was the beginning of the nonstop hard work that they have done and continue to do until today. So as I mentioned, so the fire truck had gotten there. At that point, families had just exited their homes with their kids and what was more accessible and precious to them in that moment. So a lot of them lost everything. Neighbors were helping neighbors get out of the area. Many of them were at City Hall. So our mayor and public safety director brought out whatever equipment they had to make this space accessible and safe for families. But I think the reason we're all really here today is because of what happened the following day. So this had happened on the 9th at midnight, and then by the next day, somehow, we had 12 families that were housed. How do you do that? How do you do that in Guadalupe? So this housing is right across the street from where the families had previously lived. It's H2A housing. It's a complex kind of building, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to refer to my notes really quick. So what happened was, again, how do we house 47 people? There's not any hotels in Guadalupe. There's not really a place to place folks. So our mayor and our public safety director talked to the owner of the unit, and they housed people, and they treated them with dignity and respect. And I was writing this, and I was thinking when I was in my freshman year of college, and I was homeless for a week. I was couch surfing. And I remember how that really impacted me, and I can't even imagine like how families felt when they were supported in that way. Because I don't know if you've ever not had a house, but it really has long-term impacts on you, on your confidence, on the way everything else plays out. So we're here today to really just thank them for taking that step. I'm sure that came with some grief, but ultimately, I think that they put families first, and I think actions speak louder than words. I also know, as I mentioned, we worked directly with a lot of these families, and I personally heard a lot of the team I work with, who was some of the case managers on site, some of the parent volunteers, our Guadalupe community changers who volunteered. They all heard from the families how they had never seen a group of leaders really step up and really meet them where they were at. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I know it really meant a lot to the families. In addition, I just wanted to kind of bring up very quickly how not only were they concerned about temporarily housing these families immediately, but they also did not rest until they were all permanently housed. And I think that is something we don't see every day. I also, as I was kind of putting down some bullet points, I was thinking back to some of the spaces that we shared as we were trying to plan ahead and trying to figure out how we were moving forward as part of the response team. And I recall one of the meetings we had at the Government Center in Santa Maria, and I recall Chief Cash and our Mayor Ariston, Julian, really advocating for FEMA to not only come to support, but also providing them the context of the community of Guadalupe and letting them know how we need to be mindful of the way we treat our folks. We wanted to ensure they had language access. So I just really admired that from the both of you. I also wanted to just I'll be asking each individual to come independently, but I wanted to just mention a couple of the things that I admire about each of you. So I wanted to first share that aside from all the hard work that our mayor, Ariston Julian, did during that time and continues to do, I have just seen him work really hard in our community. I have seen him trim bushes on the side of the street on a weekend. I have seen him support the food distribution with one arm. I have seen him support our resource center, the Little House by the Park, and our parent organization. He shows up to events, as well as his lovely wife Lourdes, and I'll just add that Lourdes has been present for all of it, every day. And I'm talking about Saturday and Sunday and holidays and fundraisers took place. There's been so many things and they've been up front and center. I also just wanted to highlight about our mayor that he is just kind, he's gentle, and I just really have noticed the relationship building, not only with the folks that he works with, but also with our community members. And I think that's very respectable. And ultimately, I'm just grateful that I got the ability to work with you in that capacity. And thank you so much for everything you did for our families. And if you would like to come up, I'd like to present you with your award and offer you the opportunity to share some words.
Thank you, sir. You know, one of the first individuals that came to us was Gregg Hart and Senator Limon down to the center to see what the state could do for us, and they were there. Historically, I see Joyce Littman there. In 1980, in the mid-'80s, Jack O'Connell actually did the ribbon cutting for the senior center there in Guadalupe, so you go way back. And one of the things that I gave Chief a note, we compiled a list of individuals, so there's 61 not individuals, but different categories of individuals. County Social Services, the Little House by the Park, Maria, just a ton of individuals that helped us move this effort forward. There's one lady, and Maria mentioned her, who actually grew up in the farms here locally, that understood where these people without homes, without clothing, needed, and that's my wife. Chief Cash and I work really well together, and as a mayor and him as a public safety director, we have our roles, and our roles was to actually start a structure, do the framework of this particular need that we had here at Pioneer Park, and you needed the actual mechanisms to put that home together, and it came from people like Maria, people like my wife, that actually worked with the individuals. To this day, last Tuesday, there was a young lady, 16-year-old, that had a baby. And there's a group of individual women and folks like the Little House that actually work with that lady who was Mixteco. She's part of the family that lived in the area. Talking and listening to Gregg, it's like you talk about housing, you talk about affordability. Just by the way, Guadalupe in the next 3 to 5 years is going to build 426 homes here in this area. So we're meeting arena numbers. So one of the few in the area that's actually building homes for local residents. Affordability is an issue. We can't get away from that. But I appreciate, first, one of the things is I appreciate the actual translation that's going on right now. That's very important. And from the city's perspective, and I know in Sacramento, I think there's a city council in Sacramento, it's all female. And I would love to see that here. I really would. I really would. Sorry. And me too. But I think that there's a certain compassion that females have, and males, but it seems more like, because I live with a beautiful woman, that compassion. So I appreciate being here. I appreciate working with Chief. I appreciate working with the city, Todd. We had to go through a little bit of a ruckus in terms of approving our ability to lease those units across the street. In fact, if you looked at the one units that we were in, there was 37 different apartments that each of them could house 7 H2A individuals. And to me, we were talking with the owner to say, well, how about using this when you're not using it for H2A, having housing for individuals that need homes. So there's just so much to talk about when it comes. We could go on forever here, but I appreciate the league putting this together. I appreciate what we have here, and the local representatives that are putting their shoulder to the wheel of justice for human beings. And I appreciate there's a family back here that we really care about, and will continue to care about them and the rest of the community in Guadalupe that's in need. So thank you for being here. Thank you all and thanks for Women in the League for putting this together. And Maria, you're going to see her as a rising star everywhere. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And up next, I just wanted to share some other great qualities and characteristics from our Public Safety Director, Michael Cash. I'll find you right here. And then I will have you come up right after that. So I just wanted to share some of the things about Chief Cash that I really admire, and it's his inclusivity. He brings his experience with him, and he is very honest. He's extremely approachable, always trying to connect with our community, our families. And more than anything, I think something that I really admire is your effort in trying to have these conversations to plan for the future. When things happen, it's easy to put a lot of our attention to that and then move on to something else. And that is not something we've seen with Chief Cash. He is working every day trying to find ways where we can be better prepared for another unfortunate event. Hopefully those don't happen, but we're all here, so you just don't know. So I really appreciate that, Chief Cash, your teamwork, your leadership, and also for advocating that families are treated with dignity and respect. Also at those meetings, the way you stood up for making sure that there would be, just ensuring that families would be, that FEMA would have the right folks on site that would treat our families with respect. So thank you so much, and please come up and share a few words with us.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. It's so great to see you here too.
First of all, I am extremely humbled and thankful for what you've put together and the Women's League of Voters, especially coming from a single parent raised by a mom. Okay, I always followed what the lady said. So it's great. And where'd Mr. Hart go? There he is. For me, is when you see real leadership, you want to step up and do everything. So thank you and your aide. We've worked together on some things. You're awesome, and I really, really appreciate you. The other part is I've been blessed. I got a great partner with Todd, Mr. Bonham, as far as the city administrator. We really worked to start putting things together after the fact, but really, I have to admit is Guadalupe is blessed with our council person, but with our mayor. I tell you, I've been doing this for over 40 years, and I've come across a lot of political leaders. And one thing you always see is who really are doing work. There's a lot who can talk it, but then you're like, who's really getting dirty? Hart, thank you. But our mayor, this guy will pick up anything. He's cleaning the streets. That can appreciate. He can run a city, but he'll pick up trash. But one of my real heroes, he talks about her. He's married to her. But she is the behind-the-scenes dynamo. She makes you want to step up and be not only in your work better, but be a better person. And I am just so blessed and honored that I get to even get into that arena to where she helps to build and mold this city. We are so blessed to have a person like that. This, I gotta admit, is what we're trained to do, but coming in contact with people, they bring out what we're not trained. We're trained to drive, we're trained to shoot, we're trained to write reports. We don't get training in properly treating people the way they should be treated. That comes from the interactions of people. There's a young lady that's back there that was impacted by this tragedy. And we got there, I made one phone call to the mayor late at night saying, this is what we got. Then I went back to work and we took everybody to City Hall because we had to find shelter for that evening. And we have a Red Cross trailer that's across from the fire department. We thought, let's go and get the supplies out of there. It's completely dark out there. It's raining. I'm walking over and I could see feet at the bottom of the trailer and the trailer back door was swung open. I thought I had a theft suspect and we're getting ready to draw down. It's the mayor out there getting supplies. Wow, I just blown away. And we worked throughout the entire night. And he called the missus. She's working. She's preparing. Where else do you get that? Where else do you get that? So, boss, thank you for giving me the opportunity to even be here. And it's tough to say he's your boss, but he's a mentor, he's a friend, and he's a guiding force. And we are blessed. And the young lady there, when we had to work, I have a dog, Debbie, who is also there, who helps to get people through stressful situations. I didn't have time. She became my second trainer by helping with Debbie, and she's over at Mary Buren Elementary. And I'm so blessed, and you're such a wonderful young lady. I hope someday you're going to be part of this group, and you're going to be making those decisions. And as our mayor said, as far as a whole woman city council, start thinking about it. Start thinking about it. Running this place. So thank you so much, and I am blessed, and thank everybody.
Thank you.
And lastly, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'm sure everyone here, our FSA Little House by the Park team and Guadalupe Community Changers, we want to thank you for your innovative leadership. And I also just wanted to say that what you did is going to have long-lasting impacts on these families, because many of them went from not being in such a great environment to a better one. So although they're still kind of working through some of the things that occurred, I know in the end, because of you, families will be better off. So thank you very much.